Welcome to The Poetry Joint, a podcast about poets, poems, and poetics. My name, Stephen Donahue. I have a scant knowledge of poetry, and that is the starting point for this podcast, to see what I can learn.
There's a light on in the attic. I can see it from the outside, and I know you're on the inside, looking out.
Exploring good poetry, bad poetry, sonnets, couplets, ballads, rhyme, no rhyme, grand verse, silly verse, concrete poetry, liquid poetry, words with meaning, words without meaning, old poets, young poets, radical poets, ancient poets, contemporary poets, confessional poets.
Angel-headed hipsters, burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night.
The Poetry Joint. Hang out. See where we go. This episode of The Poetry Joint will take some time for a conversation with Calgary poet Miranda Krogstad. Miranda defines herself as a spoken word poet and eternal optimist. We'll try and find out how those qualities are reflected in her poetry. First, a historical footnote. An important poet, essayist, journalist, critic, and social activist, Alice Moore Dunbar-Nelson, was born on this day, July 19th, 1875, in New Orleans, Louisiana, in the United States. Her story, well worth reading, and I'll put a link up on the Poetry Joint Facebook page. This is a short poem by her called Thought. A swift, successive chain of things that flash, kaleidoscope-like, now in, now out, now straight, now eddying in wild rings. No order, neither law, compels their moves, but endless, constant, always swiftly roves. Now some thoughts from Calgary poet Miranda Krogstad. First, why poetry?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I am a bit of an interdisciplinary artist, and I find poetry is one of my favorite tools. Storytelling in general just allows us to connect, but poetry, in my biased opinion, is a really beautiful way to express stories and to word things in a way that people want to listen to them. You know, you're catching them with rhyme and alliteration and imagery and all these beautiful techniques, and they don't really notice that they're listening to your message at the same time, you know? So it's kind of tricking people into hearing your important messages. So for me, that's why poetry, why spoken word specifically for me, is that it was an art form that felt very accessible, very heart to heart and real.
As a spoken word artist, you're putting yourself in front of people rather than writing for people. How do you view an audience?
My favorite gigs are gigs where everyone has chosen to be in the room and is attentive, you know, an attentive audience.
For young poets out there, and just out of curiosity, how did you get started with spoken word?
Yeah, so I came up through slam. So that's how I got started. That was my gateway drug, is I heard that you could perform in these little competitions. In fact, my very first performance was an open mic. I went to perform at the open mic, and they only had slam spots left. And so I was kind of, just had to do it. I was kind of forced into doing the slam because there were no non-competitive spots left, and there were only spots left in the competitive part. And that was back when the slam was at the Beatnik, if you remember that Calgary establishment way back when. It was a little basement bar that was all black with little kind of Parisian tables and chairs. It was really neat. But yeah, so after I slammed my first poem, I got into the next round. I scored high enough, but I didn't have a second poem prepared. So I had to write a poem between sets, which obviously went terribly because that's not actually in real life. In the movies, I'm sure I would have scored a 10, but in real life, you don't score a 10 for a poem. You write between sets. So that was my first slam experience. And kind of how I got into it. And then, from there, I applied to the Banff Center spoken word program. So spoken word, I guess, is the art form and slam is the competition. For those listeners who aren't familiar. So then I got into the Banff Center spoken word program.
So the Banff spoken word program, and then the progression into being a working poet. How does that go? Where do you find opportunities nowadays?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of different places that I perform. The most recent place I performed actually was the People's Poetry Festival this week, which is one of my all-time favorite places, since as when I was talking about, poetry for the people, by the people, that's the kind of space that it creates. So I absolutely love those spaces. So writers' festivals and those sorts of things are becoming more regular for me. I'm going to Salmon Arm to Word on the Lake in the spring, and in the fall, we've got Wine Country's Writers' Festival. So those sorts of places are when I talk about an audience who wants to be there and is engaged, like, man, it's such a treat to perform in those spaces where people are like looking for their fix of poetry. So I've been doing some of that. But as I say, it's something different every day. So I've had some pretty random gigs in the past. Some of the work that I'm doing currently is with the Wilder Institute in Calgary Zoo. So I write poetry about wildlife and about the different species and about different conservation programs. And then they use it to promote different conservation initiatives. And that has been so much fun. There was a moment with my first collaboration with them where I had written this poem about a tapir, which is basically like a 700-pound, like anteater looking thing, super awkward dude. I wrote this poem called "What Makes You Weird Makes You Wonderful."
Well, I can't think of a better opportunity to listen to Weird and Wonderful Tapir. Miranda Krogstad for the Wilder Institute and the Calgary Zoo.
I wish that every acne-covered brace-faced teen could meet the tapir. If you were worried about looking weird, imagine being a 700-pound jumble of the jungle with a tumbling snout like a bungee cord stump, a dumpy physique, ears that twitch and tweak like satellite dishes, a bloated belly too big for its britches, and a panda print graffitied across its torso. You would never know it took 35 million years or so to look this good. And even if you could look past its far-out features, this creature hiccups and whistles, sprays its urine 8 feet like a missile, bares its gums and tongue when it's trying to get to know you. It'll show you the definition of awkward. So it's only natural they would mock your flair. When you're this original, people stop and stare. They don't know what to call you. So they make up names. A mini hippo, Mickey Mouse, panda fin pig, a bloated horse with a big cummerbund and a worm nose, an anteater's chubby cousin in a sideways tuxedo. But let them call you what they want. Let them throw nonchalant names your way. They don't realize that, hey, what makes you weird makes you wonderful. And under all their comments, those quirky qualities make you stand out. That strange snout can be used as a snorkel. Each morsel you eat is fully fermented in your flabby physique. Those satellite dish ears can hear a tiger's paw on a crinkling leaf. Your black and white motif is camouflage in patches of shade hiding all of you. Your super spray marks your circle of solitude. Your hiccups and whistles are like an audible fingerprint, and your fetching phlegm in face lets you smell social scents. So be proud of who you are. Embrace your beautiful brand of bizarre, your signature strangeness, your characteristic quirks. Others don't have to understand the way it works, it just has to work for you. Because the truth is, after all, what makes you weird makes you wonderful.
Sounds like an interesting experience to visit the zoo and try to capture the qualities of one of its residents.
And it was so much fun to write. Got to spend a ton of time with this quirky animal who feels a little bit like my spirit animal. And then we were filming the poem, and it was at sunset in the butterfly room. If you've been to the Calgary Zoo, it's this magical place with all these tropical plants and butterflies just everywhere. And so we were filming, and there were butterflies flitting around, and the sun was setting through the trees. And I was like, I think this is as good as life gets, performing poetry kind of in this like tropical, magical place with, butterflies just flying everywhere.
How else does poetry work for you? Where else do you find yourself taking your talent?
In terms of other kinds of, I've done every kind of gig, I feel like at this point. Lots of it is in schools and at teachers' conventions. So teaching people how to teach poetry, or teaching people poetry directly. Doing kind of hands-on games where I sneak up on kids like with poetry. They don't realize they're doing poetry as they're doing the games and activities. And then they're like, oh, I have all these skills now. That's another thing I love. And then just anyone who asked me to say words. So, doing a TED Talk, got a book release coming in the fall, done German bike commercials and dance shows and just random hole in the wall events with vagina paintings on the walls. Like it's a whole mixed bag, but yeah, I really enjoy it and love the variety of it.
Let's listen to another poem. This one, Crazy, that you recorded with the Gauntlet.
That make me crazy. Well, maybe I'm crazy. Does that make me crazy? Probably. I remember when crazy was just another word on the playground. When we heard as we were running around like, man, that play was crazy. The way you snatched that ball to the air was amazing. Like, unbelievable, absurd, beyond words. It was a penny candy compliment. One that melted in your mouth and meant something sweet. That you were top-notch, awesome, can't be beat, like you could be crazy talented or so fast it was crazy. See, I guess that word just didn't even faze me. It was everywhere. It was in Britney Spears lyrics and on Valentine's cards. If someone drove you crazy, that was the whole 9 yards. And there was Crazy Hair Day and Crazy Glue. I guess all the best things in life were crazy too. So I never guessed how such a sweet-tasting word could go sour. Never realized the power it held in its original form back when being outside the norm wasn't something people were really crazy about. But I hadn't figured out that the word had been reworked for ages. It had gone through stages of hiding and self-hatred as people yelled, "Are you crazy?" to berate and deflate the shape of amazing minds. Push brilliance into corners and in every way confined it, took the beautiful word crazy and in an ugly way defined it. People on the streets were getting shot with it, caught with it lodged in their psyche as people fired it off like stigma-loaded weaponry, made them cringe and look at themselves differently in the mirror, hoping their beautiful mental quirks would slowly disappear or freeze. The same two syllables we ate like penny candies were pin-sharp pop rocks, shot like bullets from our mouths in electric shocks, stinging ears and distorting faces, undoing brains like straitjacket laces. It was enough to drive someone crazy. But times have changed, see. Now we realize no two people have the same brain. We each have a snowflake train of thought. So maybe we ought to give some consideration to what it means then. To tell someone they're crazy doesn't have to demean them. Aren't we all in some ways struggling and in some ways spectacular? I think we're just choking on a simple vernacular when the word isn't the problem. The problem is the mindset. And that we're letting a word define us instead of trying to define it. And that we'd rather be unhealthy, or unhappy than labeled. We'd rather hide away our weakness than put the cards on the table and gain understanding. We're handing over our health, losing ourself, losing our minds to save face, when there was nothing wrong with being crazy in the first place. So, instead of hiding, why don't we take pride in our individual strengths and pain? Because when you get down to it, there is no blueprint brain, no real definition of sane, just 7 billion beautiful different definitions of crazy. And maybe that's the best thing we can be. Just outstanding. Outside the box, completely unhinged, unstrapped, unlocked, and free from the expectations of society. Just countless different minds that in countless ways amaze me. And if this is our new definition of crazy, then I guess that makes me crazy. Yeah, maybe I'm crazy. Does that make me crazy? Probably.
They say standing up and speaking in front of an audience is one of the biggest fears people have. Is it an aspect of poetry that or spoken word that you have to overcome? That fear, that apprehension?
You know what? People are like, it's so, there's this shyness about it, isn't there? Like it is a little vulnerable, I think, to put ourselves out there. And that's part of the reason that I say that my workshops are kind of like, making students write without them realizing they're writing, because, we all have so many feels, but also so many inhibitions of, what are people going to think? And will they like it? And by extension, because it's a piece of us, our poetry often, will they like me? And so, just I try to encourage people to put themselves out there, whether or not their poem is perfect, because they have a story to tell that nobody else can, even if it's not perfectly edited and a Pulitzer Prize winning piece, that doesn't mean there isn't going to be an audience for it. And somebody doesn't need to hear that message in the way that you can tell it. Only you have the exact wording, the exact style, the exact delivery that you have at any point in your career. Early on, Miranda was a totally different Miranda from now, and we needed her voice just like we need my voice, so anyone who's writing out there and who's tiptoeing along the edges of poetry, like, jump on in. We're ready for you. We want to hear that. Yeah, absolutely.
Miranda has a Facebook page with more spoken word performances under Miranda K. Poet. MirandaKrogstad.com is a website with more contact information and information about the poet.
One teacher at one of my workshops said something that really stuck with me. And he said, it with a food metaphor, some people like to eat, some people like to cook, and some people like to talk about food. And all of those things are okay. You might be a poet who doesn't like to write too much, but who likes to talk about poetry, or you might just be someone who likes to consume it, who likes to just be in the room when someone's dropping some really great bars. And either way, that's awesome. Like, just be there for that. As Wakefield says, like, you can comment on social media, you can like get into it, like however you want, just like hype up the community, add your voice to it somehow.
Let's see if we can fit one more spoken word performance in. This one is a love poem. Miranda Krogstad and Vec Labs put it together. Very interesting visual accompaniment to this poem if you look for it on YouTube. Love poem.
I was born a love poem. My DNA laced with traces of affection, cultural connections woven into my motherboard. In short, a dozen different cultures who historically hated each other had to make love to make me. English, Norwegian, Russian, French, Cree, Mongolian, German, Austrian, C. I guess I'm wired to admire love and peace because of the hodgepodge of pieces that exist in me. Hard to be us versus them when you're on both teams. So it seems I was born a love poem, and it was still unknown as I sipped my first breath that the poem was just beginning. And as the world kept spinning at each turn, it became harder to discern where my love verses ended and the world began. So I gobble up as much love as I can, and I've been fed a lot. From peeled grapes on the floors of Bangkok to Italian donuts between tomatoes and sunspots to roti and chole and cha served hot from the kettle. And I'm pretty forgetful, but I never forget the taste of love. Never forget the hands that held the plates, the faces that break into a smile when they feed you. The food might vanish, but the feeling never leaves you. Love. But we only recognize sweet by comparing it to sour. Every shining day is heightened by our darkest hour. And there are powerful poisons that remind us how lucky we are to have sweet moments find us. I don't need to mention the bitter world order, the taste of dry bricks across the southern US border, the taste of gunpowder bleeding into Syrian seas, the cardboard crumble left from the internment of the Japanese, the rancid residue of residential schools, truths so dry, they're hard to swallow. So what can we do to keep tyranny from tainting the tongues of future generations? To cook up a more compassionate future for our fellow nations? Maybe we can concoct a kinder kind of Canada, leave a lingering legacy for our children to partake in. And I'm not just talking maple syrup, back bacon, and bannock. I mean the whole buffet. What are we bringing to the table at the end of the day? I want to see an amalgamation of aromas, a buffet of bliss, where each individual part adds depth to the mix. So share your food, your roots, your story. Your flavor is anything but ordinary, so lay it out with love. Don't let the poisons of our past prevent us from rising above feeling hateful or scared. Let our children be prepared to eat, not to compete, not to put walls between plates that states, "This is yours, stay away from mine." Be kind, so that when they smell saffron or the spiraling steam of Szechuan, they know that it is served with open arms, that they are breathing in the scent of solidarity, the unmistakable musk of humanity, and that it tastes like love.
That was a love poem by Miranda Krogstad. Musical accompaniment composer was Mark Stokel. As I understand it, Love Poem is going to be the opening poem of Miranda's book being released this fall, sometime around September 14th. For a spoken word artist, how exciting is it to be doing a book of poetry?
Yeah, in terms of publishing, this is my first book, and it's been a long time coming. I was very hesitant to publish at first because, as you know, spoken word poetry is very much out loud, right? It's the spoken aspect of it is very important to it. So it's all about alliteration and sound and, you know, the emotion and the delivery and the powerful pauses and all that. And I just didn't know how I would capture that in a book. I was considering doing an album, but that didn't seem quite right either. I wanted people to be able to slow down and look at the actual lyrics. The process has been adapting it to what could this be that captures some of that spoken wordsy vibe while complementing this new medium, I guess is the way I thought about it. Mm-hmm. And I have been so lucky to work with two very forward-thinking people on this book. One, Jim Jackson, my publisher, the organization called Prairie Soul Press. And so he has been so willing to just roll with my wacky idea of like, what does a spoken word book look like? And then Katrina Ginto, my graphic designer, like Stephen, some of her notes sound like poetry too, the way she describes it. She'll be like, I spread out the visuals and made the book orientation sideways for this poem so that it has more space. And it's like a breath as you close the book, like a sigh. She's done such a beautiful job. I don't know how she captures the poems visually so well. And then the lines I say louder, the text is louder and has like an emphasis line or a poster page. And like, it just feels like my work out loud, but on the page. And I don't know how she did it. I gave her some ideas and some guidance, but honestly, it's like 99% Katrina just being so creative and wonderful. So yeah, this is my first publication, but man, what a beautiful experience. And as always, just made better by the people in my community. Like, it's just, honestly, it's such a product of the brilliant humans in my life. And it's so cool when your work can spark something much greater than you could have created alone.
Miranda, you've described a varied experience as a spoken word artist. How would you describe the scene in Calgary compared to other places you've visited and spoken in? Spoken in, is that the right word? I don't know. Performed in.
Yeah, it's incredible in Calgary how strong the community is, and I feel very fortunate here. My impression was, when I was traveling with my poetry and that sort of thing and doing gigs in different cities, is that, you know, most cities had kind of a strong poetry event. They'd have like the slam, something that was monthly or weekly, but it was sort of that one thing. And I feel like if I lived longer in each city, I'd probably uncover more. But in Calgary, it's kind of neat because, as you say, we have like the cowboy poets, we have the slam, we have Single Onion, which is more kind of page poets. We have different writers' events that are strictly page and not kind of read aloud, that are just, collections and magazines and that sort of thing. We had Say Word, which is this kind of like hip hop-esque spoken word event with like, you know, hip hop music playing between poems and like very kind of like a rap-esque work. Like, there's just so many different vibes. There's Wolf Voices, which is like interdisciplinary, but lots of poetry and more kind of like towards the feminine edge. So it kind of feels like all these events are like cousins. Like, they have some overlap, they have something in common, but they each have their distinct vibe. And it's really great that you can kind of choose the environment that you fit best in and that best reflects your work. And a lot of poets wander between these different communities too, because it strengthens your poetry to hear different tools and different deliveries and different genres of poetry. You're right. The world of poetry is so vast that you could be borrowing from so many different styles and so many different poets. I will say that once you go to one event and ask around about what else is out there, often you can find other events that are related to it and other organizers will know.
Thank you to Miranda Krogstad for giving some insights into her experience with spoken word and poetry. Again, the name of her book, if I forgot to mention it, was A Glass Half Full of Poetry. That will be coming out this fall. If you're looking for an opportunity to get into spoken word poetry, enter a slam event. The Calgary Poetry Slam, I believe, happens monthly at Dickens Pub. Check out their events page for dates and times and costs. They also have links to other spoken word events. This has been the Poetry Joint. My name's Stephen Donahue. We'll leave you with a few words from Calgary's poet laureate back in time, Micheline Mailer, from a talk she gave in 2016 about poetry.
I have observed that poetry is the great connector because of what it does. Poetry makes our lives bigger through its expansiveness. It makes our lives richer, wider, and more layered by the ways in which it gives us an aesthetic frisson. These frisons often show up as, aha, or I wished I'd written that, or yes, I feel that too. And that is what poetry is, an internal communion. Sometimes labeled as gestalt, poetry is a mystical connection to what we feel and experience as profound aesthetic arrest.